founder of FeverBee. He's helped over 320 organizations, including Apple and Facebook and World Bank, so just a few little names. And he's here today to facilitate about strategy. So you're thinking about your community strategy, how to put that in place, and he is an expert who's going to share more with us. He's written multiple books on the topic of community. If you haven't seen those yet, you can find them later. And he is coming to the stage right now. So please welcome Richard Millington.
Wait for me. There's a whole process and system, but thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining the workshop here today. So I remember when, I think Beth reached out to me maybe a couple of months ago, and she said, hey, Rich, do you want to speak at CMX? I was like, absolutely. That sounds amazing. And then she said, do you want to give a workshop? I'm like, yes, I love workshops. Interactive workshops are amazing. I can get people to talk to each other. And then she said, do you want to talk about strategy? I was like, that sounds great. And then she said, you have 1 hour to do it. And that's not a lot of time to talk about like strategy, because I feel like strategy is such a broad topic. It means different things to different individuals. And then I think, OK, let's get strategic about this. What does strategy actually mean? What are the biggest issues that we can address and we can fix? And so I spent time thinking about the organizations that we've worked with, and I know many of you in this room. And I think there's a couple of very big things. Because over the last 15 years with the work I've been doing, what I've noticed is the way the organizations make decisions is often less than ideal. It's often done in a very ad hoc way. It's often done based upon assumptions. It's often not done based upon any clear data that people can actually use and see and visit. And so what I've done today is try to pick out a couple of the very key things that if we get these things right, everything else would be a lot better. And what I'm going to try and do is make sure there's some activities that we can go through together where you can participate with each other. And over the next hour, hopefully we all learn a lot and we get a lot better at the strategies that we're developing. How does that sound? If it sounded bad, would you actually say? Honestly, would you? OK, so let's get started. So let's begin with a question. Something for you to think about today. Don't shout out. I'm not looking at anyone in particular here. What is your strategy? For your community today, what is your strategy? Take a couple of seconds and just think about it. If you were to describe it, what would your strategy be? So I've asked this question a lot. I've asked this question to different clients that we've worked with. I've asked it with people that take our training course. And people really struggle with the question. And one of the reasons why we struggle with this question is, what is a strategy in the first place? Like, what does strategy mean? We've worked with so many different organizations where the definition of strategy can vary tremendously from one organization to the next. And we often find out, oh, we're talking about completely different things. So let's begin with a couple of very simple things, just to get started. One is that there's very clearly a big difference between a strategy for a community and then a community strategy. And what I mean by this, when a community is a strategy for a business, we're talking about a very different thing. We're talking about when an organization, they've decided to use the power of community to achieve their business goals. And that's a great thing to do, and there's clear reasons why an organization would do that. When you want to lower your customer support costs, then community is a strategy to achieve it. But what we're going to be talking about today is, what is a strategy for a community? What is that coherent plan for how the community is going to grow, how it's going to be more engagement, and deliver the most value it possibly can to the members? So I want to be very clear. When we talk about strategy today, we're talking about the one on the right-hand side. We're going to be talking about how we develop a strategy to make sure we maximize the full value of our community. And that begins with another thing we need to think about. What is a strategy and what is it not? One of the things I've realized is that very few of us actually get taught strategy. We're taught a lot about the business, we're taught a lot about community, but we don't often take any courses on strategy itself. And I think as a consultant, it'd be really easy to go into any of your organizations today and be like, yep, you should do that, you should do that, you should do that, you should do that, and pay me, please. That'd be an easy thing to do, but there's no methodology behind that. So I'm going to share some of the frameworks that we use and some of the best practices of what I think are best practices, and hopefully you can apply it as well. So when we talk about what a strategy is, what we're not talking about are tactics, or anything that doesn't have a clear problem or rationale. Very often when people tell me what their strategy is, they tend to say, yes, we're going to be the best community for X, or we're going to launch a gamification program, and this isn't what strategy is. A strategy is fundamentally three very specific things. One, there's a diagnosis of where we are today. One of the things I think is happening is that many of us aren't solving or working on the right problem for our communities. And the reason why that happens is that we don't diagnose the problem the right way. So the first thing we have to understand is, what's the problem we're trying to solve? Like, really, what is the problem that we're trying to solve? Two, once we know that, what is our approach to how we solve that problem? What is the guiding set of principles that we're going to apply that's going to go through to all the tactics that we implement? And then three, what are the logical actions that we create and use as a result of that? What are the actions that we're going to implement? How do they all connect everything together? So this right here is a very simplified example, but gives you a very simple template that you can use. And so now we can find out what is and isn't a strategy. And we know, for example, that increasing engagement by 25%, that could be a great goal, not a strategy. We know that our strategy is to be community-led. That's a vision, but not really a strategy. We know that if you're doing AMAs or a newsletter or video, again, this is a list of activities, but it's not strategic in the sense. What we want is something that's strategic, that includes that diagnosis, that includes the policy we're going to implement, and then a coherent set of actions. And you can find lots of examples like this. You can take a second to read through these if you want. But just make sure that whatever you're doing, there's a clear strategy to it. Like for anything that we want to achieve in our communities when we work with clients, we want to make sure they get the very big decisions right. And if we do just this incredibly well, many of our communities will be doing a lot better than they are today. So when we think about what a strategy is, and going back to that initial question I asked you, like, what is your strategy today? If you were to think about it and had to put it in this format at the moment, what would that be? Take maybe 30 seconds just to think about this. If you were to describe your strategy today, what would that be? And I'll give you another 20 seconds for that. So you can write this down if you want. You can put it on your phone. You can just think of it in your head. But what would this be? What's the diagnosis? What's the policy? And what are the actions that you're taking at the moment? So take another maybe 10 seconds on that. So you were just about to take a photo? I can pose if you want. You good? Awesome. Okay. So what we're going to do now is go through each part of these, because I think there's so much depth and ways of doing this so well, and ways of doing this quite badly. And let's begin with the diagnosis of where we are today. Very often when organizations aren't working on the right thing, it's because they haven't used their data or the right information to diagnose what problem they're trying to solve, or what opportunity are they trying to achieve. So some questions that we think about here is, one, what is happening in the environment? A community never lives in isolation. It's always beholden to the environment that it's in. So what environment is that community in? Two, what's happening in the organization? What's changing in the organization today? Three, is the community successful or not? And four, are the metrics heading in the right direction? Are the metrics going where we want them to go? So a way of thinking about this is that very often we begin with layers. And this is the results layer. These are usually the things that we want a community to achieve. Don't take a photo yet, it'll get a lot better in a minute, just trust me on this. So when we talk about what results, usually support, success, engagement, retention, and some metric that represent these kind of things. But you only achieve these results if you get the community experience right. So when we talk about results with our clients, we often use a template that's like this. I think we borrowed this from Vanessa DiMauro and adapted it. But essentially, first with clients, we try to get a sense of what are the metrics that matter to them. At the very top in the blue you see there, which one of these columns here makes the most sense to them. And it varies for every organization. Definitely I'd prefer them to be more on that side than this side, but we don't always control that. So we begin by thinking, which of these things in blue makes sense to them? And then once we know that, then we can scroll down and zero in on the exact metric that makes sense. And that's usually based on what data they have any access to at the moment. But first thing we want to know is, what are the results that matter to them, and how are we going to measure those results? And like I said, we only achieve those results if we're delivering the right kind of community experience. This is the community experience layer. This is where you usually have more control than almost any other layer. This is where we think about how we're going to get members to join and participate. This is how we think about the positioning of the community and the user experience and the onboarding and the super user program. All the levers that we get to pull to try and drive the results that we want to achieve. Next, the experience that you offer is very dependent upon the kind of organization that you work for. There's a huge difference between working with an organization with a budget of 7 figures and an organization with a budget of 5 figures. And so there's a huge difference based upon your organization at the moment. So what is the tolerance for risk? What are the technological constraints of the organization? Are stakeholders on board or not? What's the rate of growth? These are the kind of things that really matter. And then the organization, in turn, is affected by the environment. What environment are they in? What are the things that matter most to them? What are the actions of competitors, new technologies? What's going on with the audience? Are the needs of the audience beginning to change or shift or not? What are the things that matter most to them? Take maybe 30 seconds just to look at these and think about which of these matter most to you. Which of these are relevant to you at the moment? Very specifically, think about these 3 questions at the moment. Is your community achieving the results it wants to achieve or not? Is that heading in the right direction? And then thinking about the organization layer, are any of these relevant to you at the moment? Are they changing? Is the organization changing? Do you have the support that you need? Then finally, at the macro layer, what's changing there? What's changing about that audience? Take maybe another 30 seconds, and just to make a mental note or list down which of these are most relevant to you at the moment. A quick show of hands, by the way. How many of you are looking for work at the moment? OK. So if you're looking for work, maybe use your past employer, whatever makes sense to you. Quick aside, how many of you are recruiting? Can we have a big show of hands? Some of you are going to be very popular after this session. It's a rough market, like it really is. OK. So here's what I want you to do at this point. Let's figure out what is the problem we really need to solve at the moment by looking at the 5 whys. I think we're all familiar with a model that's like this. What's the problem that you're trying to solve? And so here we begin is, what are the symptoms that you're seeing? Like the very core, what are the symptoms that you're seeing at the moment? Then why is that happening? Why is that happening? And keep going down until you get a core thing. So just mentally do this or do it on your worksheet at the moment, but go through what the 5 whys are for you. One way we think about this is really trying to figure out what is really happening in that community. So here's an example. Let's imagine that the number of posts in a community has declined. It's really easy at this point to jump to a whole range of solutions, right? Gamification, super user programs, changing platforms, like so many things that you could do. But until you've actually solved what the real issue is, you shouldn't be doing any of these things. So in this case, it could be, are fewer members participating? Because if the number of posts has gone down, it's either that fewer people are participating, or the people that used to participate aren't participating as often. And you can set up a whole range of binary questions that you work through. And you might find out the number of posts has declined because fewer people are participating. And, and it's that newcomers, that veterans aren't engaging as much as what they used to. And that's because they're not seeing as many questions to answer as they used to. But this is the problem. This is what you have to solve. And it really guides you to be laser focused in what you want to achieve. So you want to be very clear of what the diagnosis is. So here's some examples of past clients that we've adapted just slightly that you can work with. So one, problem. Engagement has declined in the forum. And the root cause that content is based upon internal assumptions rather than member needs. And then we have a diagnosis, which is our community forum suffers from low engagement because members rarely return after their first visit. This is primarily due to irrelevant content created without a systematic understanding of member needs. And again, you can see that when we drill down deeper and deeper, we get to the real challenge that we're trying to solve. And even in consulting, that's a lot of what the work is. Like we might find that a client has picked, a community platform like Salesforce, they're not here, so we'll get to Salesforce, that they shouldn't be using. And then you have to think, why did that happen? It's one thing to say that the platform wasn't that good, but it's another thing to think about, why did they pick that platform? There's a lack of knowledge or expertise or understanding, and we need to solve that problem as well as the core one. OK, so let's do an exercise together. So here's what I want you to do. In pairs, ideally in pairs, maybe groups of 3 if you can't make pairs work, with someone that you don't work with, because I think you get more value if you don't work with them. I want you to pair up, and I want one person to go through their current situation. What's your challenge? Is your community successful or not? Is the environment changing? What's the root cause? Like, what's really happening there? And the other person is going to summarize the problem in one sentence, and then you're going to swap. So we're going to spend maybe, 6 minutes on that? And please just go ahead. So pair up with someone else, probably someone that you don't work with, because I think you get more value out of this. And you have to be quick. We've only got 6 minutes. You have to be quick. If you don't have a pair, please raise your hand. We have one person. Oh, you're not raising your hand. OK. Five and a half minutes. Four minutes remaining. 4 minutes remaining. Three minutes left. You should now swap. 3 minutes left. 2 minutes left. 2 minutes left. One minute remaining. 1 minute. 1 minute left. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Okay, I need you all to be quiet. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. Thank you is British for be quiet, okay? Thank you, everyone. How did that go? Awesome. So I'm not going to ask people to read theirs out, but the process of diagnosing the right issue is critically important. And it's never just an issue in isolation. You've always got to think about what is the macro environment, what's happening in the organization, and how does it all connect as well. And hopefully we're at a pretty good level with this. So let's go to the next step. How many of you feel quite confident in your diagnosis at the moment? Quick show of hands. Wow, that's really bad. Okay. This next step is going to be a bit awkward now. But honestly, like when we do this, we don't do it live in like a 30-minute session, right? We do it by looking at the data, asking lots of questions, going into an organization, and so there's a whole process behind it. But the key thing is having the right methodology. Because I think if you have the right methodology, you're not just randomly trying to pick things to fix. You really know what is the problem you're trying to solve and how do you solve that exact issue. What I'm going to go through now is what are the types of strategies that we can deploy. And obviously, every organization is very different. And you'll be applying it in different ways, and you might have to adapt it to your situation. But there's some fundamental types of strategy in most communities that we work with that we tend to choose between. One is how we optimize what the organization is already doing. Two is when we have to adapt. This is where we're changing the goals, the audience, or the platform. Three is repairing. This is when something isn't working and we have to fix it. And four is when we're relaunching or revamping the entire experience. And the challenge is, how do we know when to use each? So this is a matrix that we use for this. The first thing is the community metrics heading in the right direction or not? So quick show of hands, how many of you work for communities where your metrics are heading in the right direction? Okay. Thank you. And how many of you are working for communities that are heading in the wrong direction? Your bravery impresses me, so thank you so much for that. Okay, so it's important to know whether they're heading in the right direction or not. The next thing we look at is going back to the results. Are the metrics heading in the right direction? Next, is the environment stable or not? Because there's a huge difference in building a community where the environment is quite stable and there's not much that's changing at the moment, and when it's something that is changing. So this is where we look at this macro environment, if this makes sense. We look at, are there any big changes in any of these things that are relevant to us? And based on that, we can start to figure out what is the right strategy. So a quick show of hands, how many of you, oops, let's go back. How many of you are working for a community where the environment is quite stable? That's a damning sign of the times, isn't it? And how many of you are working for communities where the environment is changing? Okay, so this is how we think about it. One, if your community is successful and you're in a stable environment, then we want to optimize what we're doing. Like, things are working, and we just need to freaking go. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on stage. It's been a weird debate today. So we just need to go. That's where we look at internal, we benchmark the community, we identify what we can double down on, we make sure we're spending our time as best possible. But the key thing at the moment, if you're in this box, is optimizing. How many of you are in this box? Stable environment and successful community? A couple of you. OK. Next, if your community is successful and things are beginning to change, that's when we have to adapt. And this is usually, not always, but usually when we have to think about changing the goals, changing the technology, or bringing the community into alignment with whatever is changing in that environment. How many of you are in this box? OK, a lot of you are in this box. Interesting. 3, if things aren't successful and the environment is quite stable at the moment, this is where we have to repair things. We have to figure out what's not working and how do we fix those things. This, again, as we'll come to in a minute, is where we do a deep dive into that root cause. Really figure out what's working, what's not working, what is the real core issue, and how do we fix that? How many of you are in this box? A couple of you. OK. Thank you. I love it when one person puts their hand up. OK. And finally, when things aren't working and the environment is changing, why would you keep doing what you're doing? This is usually where you need to relaunch or revamp entirely what you're doing. And how many of you in this box? OK, that's bad news for you. You know what? It's a great opportunity for you. There we go. But it's also like the most work, and it's hardest internally to get that right. So here's the challenge for you today. I want you to write down the type of strategy that you need. Just be very clear, like what box that you're in. You can work with your partners again, but I'll give you maybe a minute and a half for it. But just be very clear about which box that you're in and why. So is your community successful or not? And is the environment changing or not? And I'll give you a minute and a half, starting now. So again, you can work in pairs, in your threes. I do think it works better in pairs, then you have more time to talk, but yeah. One minute remaining. $30 left. Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, thank you, thank you. Please be quiet. You said it. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Attention back to me, please. Thank you. Thank you. So hopefully now we've got a sense of what type of strategy we need. And this matters. Like, honestly, if your environment is beginning to change, then it makes no sense to keep doing what you're doing, because at some point you have to change too. And if things aren't working, then you don't want to be trying to optimize what you're doing. So having the right type of strategy in the first place is such a critical thing. And I think if we just get this right, we'll be doing a lot better than many of the organizations building a community today. So now we start thinking about what's the action plan? Like, we know broadly what we're trying to do. What are the very specific things that we want to do? Because at this point, we know roughly where we are. There's a diagnosis. Can we turn the lights down, please? There's a diagnosis. So we know that our community suffers from low engagement because members rarely return after their first visit. This is primarily due to relevant content. And there's a policy that we're going to take to change that. So there's the type of strategy. We know exactly what the policy is. And now we start filling the blanks of what are the tactics that we're going to use. And honestly, the action plan will vary tremendously by the type of community by the type of approach that we're going to take. And what I'm going to go through is what we're going to do for each one of these boxes. So if you're in the optimized box, I'll share some of the tactics and frameworks that we use, and then we'll go through each box in turn. But even if I'm not going through your type, I really hope that you pay attention, because I think at some point you will be working on this, and it's a good idea to have some of the matrices and frameworks that can be useful. So if we want to optimize a community, essentially we want to invest our limited time and resources to achieve the biggest impact that we possibly can. And we have to think about, how do we do that? There's nothing we urgently have to fix. We're just trying to maximize the value of that community at the moment. And the first thing we do is think about, okay, what are the programs that we're running today? What user groups are we running? What content? What super user programs? What gamification? What are the core pillars that we're using today? And which of them are critical to the stakeholders, internal and external? And then which of them are successful or not? And I think matrices like these are really simple because it gives you a good idea of what to be working on. So again, very similar to what we just had. If you're working on something that's going well, then we want to invest in more time and resources on it. If things aren't going well, then we want to experiment to try to fix it if it's critical to the stakeholders. And then finally, if it's growing in high engagement but not critical to stakeholders, we might want to just keep doing that. And then we want to stop doing anything that's clearly just not working. And the key thing from this is it has to balance out. I think one of the common mistakes we see again and again and again is people will try to add more tactics and more programs to what they're doing without balancing out what they're going to stop doing. So you have to balance out these things. Whatever you want to invest more time in, you have to figure out where that time is going to come from. So if you're in this box, really think about what are the programs that are critical to stakeholders at the moment, and what's working or growing in engagement or success by whichever metrics you use. Another way that we optimize is going up the ladder. So we know that in a community, there's a hierarchy of needs. And we know that very often, for most brand communities, not all, but most, many people first come to a community because there's a frustration. There's something they're really keen to fix. But once they fix that, if there's nothing else they need, they tend to leave. And so a way to improve the value and optimize the community is to go up the ladder. People first, they want to resolve a frustration. Then it's often they want to be seen or heard. Then it's to be excited. Then it's to be inspired. So if you're looking for new programs to implement in your community, thinking about this kind of ladder with these levels often makes a huge amount of sense. Another thing we think about is if we want to really grow and increase engagement in a community, there's different ways of doing that. One way is we have more members that are participating in the community. Another way is that we get members that are participating to participate more. And there's different approaches and strategies here. This is where we get to see the strategy in action. It's one thing if you want to just drive more engagement from the people already engaging. It's another approach entirely if you want to grow. It's another if you want to persuade people to do something different. And expansion is where we start thinking about broader ecosystem environments, social media, and other programs that we can run. So if you're in this box, just take a second and think about which of the things matter most to you. What are the kinds of tactics and ideas that are coming forth when you think of these frameworks? Next, we think about how do we adapt? I think more people raise their hand for this than any of the other options. And adapting is a real pain, because often there's so many sunk costs, there's so many investments you've made, and it's really hard to change your mind and persuade everyone else to change their minds too. So when we think about adapting, it's really about how do we bring a community into line with current trends. Like a lot of things, I think a lot of what a strategy should do is make sure the community is aligned with the current trends and not fighting against them, because it's not a fight that we usually win. And so here, I'm not going to read out every question, but some core things that we tend to ask. First, we look at the goals of the stakeholders and figure out, have these changed? If we look at all the symptoms in like this column here, have any of these things changed? Are we noticing anything that's changed that we need to adapt to? So we take a moment just to read through these and really try and figure out, are any of them relevant to us? What's changed? I'll give maybe 15 seconds. And once we know this, we think, okay, have things changed internally? Next, we begin to think about, has the technology changed? Is there anything in the technology space that we need to be thinking about at the moment? Is there trends that we need to be paying attention to of where people want to go, how they engage? Are there new compliance issues that we have to fall in line with? Has the organization recently moved CRM and wants the community to be aligned with that? What are the trends that we need to be thinking about at the moment? What are the questions that we need to be asking, and how do we adapt to these kind of things? And then finally, we think about the audience. And I think this is the most challenging one at the moment, which is, has the audience changed? Have the preferences of the audience changed? For a while now, I've been talking about this community everywhere approach, where I think that the needs of the audience are changing beyond just a form in many cases. And we have to adapt with that as well. And how do we balance that with having control and ownership of data? There's lots of new issues that arise. But fundamentally, we want to be asking these questions on the left here. Hopefully you can see that at the back. If not, I'll send out the slides afterwards. But we ask these kinds of questions here, look for very specific things, and then there's very specific steps that we can take as well. But fundamentally, what we want to be doing is just making sure that if we have to adapt, how do we adapt? One of the things that really drives me nuts is when an organization will change one platform to another. And their mindset is often, yeah, there's something that we don't like about that platform, so we're going to move. And they end up replacing one set of issues with another set of issues. And it's not strategic. You know, your attitudes aren't the reasons why you should change a platform. You should change when there's a core reason to change that platform at the moment. Okay, so I'll give you some idea of how to adapt. And adapting is the hardest one because there's so many different ways that you can adapt. Next is where we repair. This is where we think about what is the core thing that's broken, and then how do we fix that thing? And this is where we start looking at some very specific things and going through the same journey that we went through already, which is ideally, we set up a series of binary questions that we can answer to get to the root cause. We've gone through this already, so we know this already, which is we begin with what's the problem, and then what are the two possible causes of that, and then what are the options that we can think about what's causing that. And over time, we can really drill deep into the data question that we can ask to figure out if that's the issue. And then we have a clear problem of the definition. And then we can develop solutions. And what's important, and what you might notice here, is that these solutions are completely different. And your odds of getting the right solution about looking at the data are just 1 in 8, or 6, 7, 8. It's just a very small percentage of getting that right if you don't really go through the questions in a data-driven way. So you want to be really zeroing in on what is the core problem we have to fix, and then making sure we're targeting that. And very often, if, for example, fewer people are reaching your community, it's nothing on the platform that you have to fix. It's usually things around that platform. So we have to be solving the right problem in the first place. So it might be an example here. Our community suffers low engagement because members rarely return after their first visit. Then we have a root cause of why that's the case. And then we have to figure out internally what we have to change to solve that issue. So this root cause approach is really, really successful if we take a data-driven approach. Again, nothing in a strategy should be a hunch. It should all be just flowing down from what we've seen already. OK, relaunch repair. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, just because it's such a big topic of how we relaunch and realign our community. But a couple of things I would say is you need data like this before you launch a community, which is before you launch just another community into a space. What you want to know is, what are the problems that your audience has at the moment? Because these are obviously the things that you want to build a community around. 2 is, how severe are they? Like, it's really hard to build a community around an issue that people aren't that affected by. 3, how frequent is that issue? If you want to predict how often that people are going to engage in your community, the frequency of the issue is the most predictive one. 4 is, where do members go at the moment? Next, we look at why do they go there. Sometimes we ask how satisfied they are with that. And then we have a pretty good idea of why they would or wouldn't go to the community as well. And once you have this kind of data, it becomes really easy to launch a community that is successful on the right platform with the right goals, and everything is just aligned. And you can do this in an ecosystem map. I might just skip the slide for now. We're just looking at where the opportunities, like where are the opportunities where there are unmet needs, where a community can add value to the audience. Very often when a community is not successful or not gaining much traction, is because they get the concept wrong. There's not really a core reason why someone would engage in that community, because that need is satisfied by other channels. And then, when you are going to launch a community, make sure you take a right approach. There's an absolutely huge difference between launching a community for a large organization with tens of thousands of customers or members or people that they can reach, compared to where you're starting from scratch. Like, starting from scratch where you have no audience is a completely different game, and you have to take a completely different approach. So this really depends on what approach you're going to take, but for most of the major brands, it's a redirection approach. They've got a lot of people that are asking questions in support, and they're redirecting them to another channel, and that works tremendously well. But then if you're a smaller audience, you'll try like different approach. You might begin with industry roundtables. You might begin with one founder that's building an audience themselves and then convert it to a community. But take the right approach. Like, don't always just jump into a big vendor-driven platform launch if you don't have the audience for it. OK. So the next step is to prioritize the actions. Based upon what box we're in, we should have a clear idea of what kind of actions make sense to us. And now we have to prioritize these. It's actually kind of annoying, because Paz actually went through this just in her session. But we will refresh it for everyone here. One is, we're really thinking about how do we make sure that we are prioritizing what we're doing. There's so many things you can do. How do you figure out if you're doing the right things? One way is the RICE framework here, which is, what is the reach? What is the impact of each of the actions? How confident are we that it will succeed? And this is also why speaking to your peers really helps, because you get a good gauge on that. And how much effort or resources is that going to be? Like, how much time and effort is that going to take? And then you can figure out, like, what are the actions that we should prioritize in a particular way. You can give them a score, and then you can figure out what you should be working on first. Really, with most organizations, they're doing too many things. Like, most of you, I'm guessing, in this room will be doing too many things. And a lot of what we do with clients is really just zeroing in. Like, what are the core things that are going to have the biggest impact in the shortest amount of time and are going to have achieve the results that we want to achieve? If this is too complex, then there's a simpler way of doing it, which is, what's high impact, what's high cost, and then use a model just like this, or the one that Paz shared as well, and use a model that's very simple and just prioritizing the right things in the right way. And this is an easy way of doing it, and just making sure that you have a whole roadmap that's built upon this. OK, here's the last activity of the day, which is, well, in like this talk. I don't know about later or tomorrow. One, I want you to spend a couple of minutes just listing, not 3 minutes, let's make it 2, just think about time. Listing the possible actions you can take, assess their severity and cost, place them in a matrix or prioritize them, and then swap and do it with your partner as well. But trying to help each other. If you're doing it in pairs, then begin with one person, help them figure out what they should be doing based upon what their needs and goals are, and then swap and do the other one. So take maybe, let's do 4 minutes on each side, and then we'll wrap up after that. So you're going to list the possible actions you can take. You're going to prioritize them by the severity and cost, or the impact of that action and cost. place them on a matrix or prioritize them based upon the principles we shared, and then we'll swap and do the other side. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Go ahead. OK, thank you, everyone. Hopefully, you found that useful, or at least it gave you some frameworks and tools to think about what strategy you're actually trying to use. Because I think so often when, as an organization, we get sidetracked, and we make decisions based upon hunches or assumptions or instincts, and I don't think that's a data-driven approach. I think if we're going to get strategy right, then we've got to be following a process, a methodology that's defensible, that can get us to the actions that we want us to go. And that's where we're going to wrap up here today. Obviously, if you want more information, you can download my book for free, or my second book for free, because the publisher didn't let me do the last one. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone. It's been an absolute honor to speak to you here today. And yeah, CMX, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.